day from the different parts of the world that you are in. And it's a pleasure to have you all. So, we would be having two speakers for this event today. And basically, what we are talking about would be the basis for academic and scientific writing. So, our first speaker would be Aishat Motolani, and she is currently a fifth year PhD candidate at the Department of Pharmacology at Indiana University School of Medicine. And she studies the regulation of an inflammatory protein in pancreatic cancer and has led and contributed to 12 peer-reviewed scientific publications and often writes for a cancer blog called Oncobite. Aishat is also the recipient of the IU Wells Graduate Fellowship and has submitted an NIH F99K00 grant, and she has also won several conference travel awards. In her leisure, she does enjoy cooking Nigerian food, hiking, playing tennis, and also gardening. We welcome Aisha to please start the session.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you so much for the invite. Um, Looks like there was some miscommunication. I thought it was going to be like a panel presentation where we just give a brief introduction about ourselves and like students ask questions. So I don't have a PowerPoint present like made, but I can just go through like my experience and the thoughts I have with regards to academic writing, which is what I do mostly compared to scholarship. I've applied to a couple of fellowships, like she mentioned in the introduction, but I only got one, so I'm not sure if scholarship and fellowship falls in the same category, but I can talk about my experience with both types of writing. Um, just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I'm currently in Indiana in the US, but I've been in the US for the past 8 years. I came here during like right after secondary school in Lagos, Nigeria. I came here for my college degree, and I studied biological science for my undergrad. And during that time, that's when I got my first exposure to like academic writing. I started working in a research lab during my second year of undergrad. And at the end of the research program, we expected to like write a summary, but I wasn't aware that we're supposed to write a summary of our actual research that we did. I thought it was supposed to be like a actual research article. So for the first time, that was the first time I wrote something that looks like a research article, and my mentor was stunned. It was like, wow, we told this postdoc to come take a look at it. And that's when I knew that, oh, this is something I really enjoy doing, and this is something that I could see myself improving on in the future. And when I think about writing, I think about it as like regurgitating your thoughts and bringing them to life. So when it comes to fellowship writing, sometimes you're like, or scholarship, sometimes you have to do a little bit of reflection, and those reflection like brings up the thoughts that you can then pour into writing. But for academic writing, you actually have to read the evidences, or maybe you're talking about, like I mentioned, I study inflammatory protein. So if I read about the protein, then in my mind, I start to generate thoughts about it. And of course, I'm going to write the facts, but then I'm also going to write it in the way I interpret it in my head. And that's how I go about my thought process when I'm writing for like an academic article. And also, when you're writing, the first thing is to just write. So after you've brewed the thoughts by reflecting or by reading articles, just pour whatever you have in your mind, pour it onto a paper or pour it onto your Word document. And then the second step is editing and making sure like everything is grammatically correct and all of that. And also, I would say there's like a science to writing and also art to writing. And for academic writing, there's usually a template. You don't need to reinvent the wheel in that aspect. So for the research articles I publish, there's usually there's usually abstract, which captures like what you worked on in like few words. most of it is usually between 200 to 250 words. And then you have the introduction where you talk about the background of what you worked on and like what you're looking at in the last paragraph. And then you have the materials and method, and then you have the result, discussion, and conclusion. So those are the different aspects that you have to touch on with writing a research article. And basically you just have to read and find evidences that fits each of the different aspects of the article. And with like composing whatever you want to write, another science to that is you have to have an intent behind every sentence. So for example, you want to write an introduction about a topic, right? First, maybe it's about pancreatic cancer, like what I study. Some things that you can have as a framework to basically compose the intent behind every sentence. For example, you can be like, okay, so what's the incidence of pancreatic cancer? What are the statistics? Does it affect men or women? So all of those things, when you think about it, it prompts like what you could write. So those are some things that you can use like as a science to actually compose and what to write. Currently, I'm training a student in our lab, and she's writing a review article, and she usually tells me like, Aisha, I don't know what to write. Like, how do you start writing? Because it just seems so daunting to her. And I was like, just take the topic and break it down, and then look at the keywords. Okay, you have to talk about genetic alteration of something. So what types of genetic alterations are there? So if you basically break it down that way, you would see like there's a science to how you can write or compose whatever it is you want to do. And after that, there's like the art to writing as well. So this is like the plot, and this is mostly encountered in like scholarship and fellowship writing. You want to make sure like you're telling a story. For example, some of the fellowships I applied for, especially the one I got, it requires you to touch on academic excellence, social consciousness, character, and there is one other thing. So I noted those things, and I'm like, okay, the science to this is I have to write things that are gonna hit on all of those points, but then there's an art to it, right? So when they read it, you want them to feel like they're walking through like a story, like they're walking through the experiences you've been through. And you can do all of this by basically, I don't know, by creating a plot. Is an art. It's not something that has a formula to it. It's something that you have to be creative with. You know, it can depend on how you structure the paragraphs. For example, maybe you start with when most people usually start with when they were younger, right? Or something they've done in the past. Some people just put like a hook, or they create like a hook that would grab the reader's attention, and that way they keep reading and they follow the story. It can also depend on the types of words you choose to use. So like, for example, agree may sound better than using the word support in some sentences. So those are the little things that can affect the flow of your writing and also make it like coherent. And when people read it, it leaves an impression on them basically. That part cannot be taught particularly, but through like practice and like writing multiple kind of essays like that, you kind of get, it's something that is unique to how you write, and then you kind of get the hang of it, and you can apply to like several different types of writing. Um, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but like when you write, the first thing is you basically pour all of your thoughts on the paper, and then you start to edit. So editing is also part of writing. So editing can also be maybe you're changing like the science to the writing. For example, instead of maybe talking about the past first, you want to talk about the present first, and then move the paragraphs around. That could be part of editing. And most editing, people think about like correcting the grammar and maybe changing the flow and all of that. So that's also part of writing. And there are several tools you can use for this. There's Grammarly. There actually it's a lot. There's Grammarly. There's ChatGPT now. But I'll be careful with that because sometimes you don't. I would say don't ask ChatGPT to generate ideas for you or to generate things to write for you. Sometimes you can just copy what you've already written and ask it to refine it. And sometimes it does that in a kind of exaggerative way. So you just pick and choose whatever you want from what it's written, but don't copy and paste it. But it's been helpful to like refine how my writing flows. Um, there are also people on Twitter and LinkedIn that talk about writing and academic writing a lot. I can put it in the chat if I have that. Yeah, I can put it in the chat afterwards. Some of the people that are helpful to me. And then you can always bookmark their post and go back to it later. They share like resources that could help you with writing. And also, some of them have like services that they offer as well, if you're open to that. And also, I'll say with writing, like simplicity is key. I mean, I did my schooling in Nigeria. I know, like we like big grammars. We like to use like big words to sound more smart, but that's not always the case. Like if you're using so many big words in one sentence, then it throws the reader off. So it's better to just write very simplistic. There's something they call like the 3 C's of writing. You have to be clear, you have to be coherent, and you have to be concise. So keeping things simple will help you achieve those 3 C's. Another thing I want to touch on is like books that you can read. I mean, I'm not a avid book reader, but some of the books that I've read that actually help me with writing. One is, I'll also put this in the chat after my little presentation. One is Deep Work by Cal Newport. And this basically talks about this can be applied to anything, but when I was reading it, I was reading it with the intent of it helping me with my writing. And one of the things that stuck out to me the most is achieving the state of flow during writing. So when I write, I prefer to be like in a silent place, no distractions and anything. Some people like to have like background music and all of that. And whichever helps you achieve the state of flow, which is basically like this stream of consciousness where things just flow out of you, basically. Like after you've done your reflection or you've read a bunch of articles, like when you start writing, you just keep writing. Like you don't know if time is passing or anything like that. So that book was really helpful to help me understand how to achieve that. Another one is like Still Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but that book helped me realize that sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like people publish stuff online every single time, and that not everything is new. Nothing is like new these days, like except if you like do research and find new data and like publish that, then that's new. But most of the stuff that people publish now, it's basically like a copy from what other people have done, but they brand it and like mold it in a different way. And when you read it, sometimes if you don't look too deep, you would think it's something entirely different. For example, even on social media, some people would watch a TikTok video and then make a whole tweet out of it on Twitter, like someone different, and then they build their audiences or whatever off of those content, but they're not actually generating those content themselves. They're taking their ideas from what other people have done, but like in a different format. So things like this help when you're writing for academics as well, because you don't have to always reinvent the wheel. You can just mold it in a different way. Another one is by Austin Kleon is Show Your Work. So because I like some of us are like very, very humble and we don't like to talk too much about our achievements and stuff. But sometimes when you're writing things like scholarship and fellowship, you need to be very, very bold in your tone. Like when someone is reading it, they can tell that you're really, like, you really did what you did, what you're talking about. So if you're someone who is very, very humble, you wouldn't want to like talk about your achievements in a very proud manner, not like arrogant manner, but like in a way that you're proud of, that this is what I did. If you read Show Your Work, it gives you that extra boost or that extra inspiration to like, be free to talk about what you did and emphasize the key points that will help you hit all the notes that the scholarship wants or that the fellowship wants. Um, yeah, that's my little spiel for my experience with academic and scholarship writing. So I'll put all the resources I mentioned, I'll put it in the chat so you can always refer back to that if you need that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. So we would just have a brief 5-minute Q&A session. And if anyone has any questions to ask Aishat, please feel free to put it in the chat box. I do have one question to start with, though. So based on your experience, are there different templates for different academic papers?
By template, do you mean like, I would say yes. Yes, it depends on the journal that you want to publish in. I'm in the biomedical science field, so I'm not sure. Even within the biomedical science field, different journals have different format. For example, I've published in one of the journals one of the papers I recently submitted, they require you to have a simple summary and an abstract. And the abstract it has a lot more scientific jargon, but like for the simple summary, you have to have like something that a lay person can read. And some journals, they don't require you to have a conclusion. You can just lump in the conclusion with the discussion section. Some will require you to have a whole another conclusion, and some will require you to have something called perspective, which is basically what do you think your finding is going to do to like the field or like future discoveries, whatever, which is kind of hypothetical, but some do require that. Results is standard across all of the journals that I've seen, and also introduction. And also for academic writing, there are also different formats because you can publish a short communication, or you can publish a review article, or you can publish a actual original research article. So I've noticed like for short communications, there are no distinction like between introduction, result, whatever. You just write a whole, it's like a newspaper, basically like columns of what your findings are. So it's called short communications. And so there is no like section between introduction, results, and whatever. You just pick each paragraph that you write, and you kind of, maybe the first paragraph you can talk about the background, and the second paragraph you talk about what you found, and the third paragraph you kind of conclude and what that means for the future. But there's no really any distinction for that. So yes, there are um, differences in the format.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for that. And we're still entertaining any questions from anyone for the next 3 minutes. So if anyone has any questions, you could just put them down in the chat and we could ask Aishat. Okay, so it looks like someone has a question. Okay, so Anna Banjo Michael is asking how to document and review papers in chapter 2, which is literature review. He's in his final year and his project is about research.
Okay, I forgot to mention that, but maybe the second speaker will touch on it as well. But with academic writing, it's important to also have grasp on how to use one of the many citation managers that is out there. The one I currently use, I started with Mendeley, but something happened, and then I switched to Zotero, which has been working great for me since I started my PhD. So Zotero is basically, it has a browser connector, and it has an online library, and you can also download the app where you can create different folders. And when you read papers on, for example, if you open Google Chrome and go to PubMed or Google Scholar, and you open a paper that you really want to use for your writing, you can click on the browser connector thing, and then it's going to ask you to save it. So if you already have different folders in your library, then you can basically save those papers into different folders. For example, I study the regulation of an inflammatory protein in pancreatic cancer. So in my library, I have a folder titled Pancreatic Cancer. I have a folder titled Previous Studies that I've looked at the regulation of that protein in other cancers. And I have a folder that is looking at the particular type of modification I'm looking at. Basically, any information I find about that modification, I save it in that folder. So when it's time for me to write, I just go through those folders, and it helps keep me organized in terms of the information I need to write. And it also makes it easy for me to do the referencing, which is what most people use Citation Manager for. So I would say if you're looking at papers, if you have that Citation Manager, then you can easily save it into the library, and that way you can always go back when you need to write. And it also helps literature review.
Okay, so we also have two questions from Samuel Ogunshola. So he says, how do we leverage collaboration in academic writing? And the second question says, how do we go about making figures for academic publications?
Okay, yeah, those are great questions. In terms of collaborations in academic writing, it largely depends on your PI and which means like your supervisor, or how much hands-on or hands-off they are. Some supervisors just leave you to go do your thing, and that's not the case for me. So I wouldn't know how to independently go meet people and leverage collaborations. But my supervisor, she's very hands-on, and I sometimes give her ideas of like, she actually knows more than me because she's been at the university for so long. So she knows who is good at this particular field. And if sometimes she receives invitation to write an article, and maybe it's not completely within our expertise, she already knows who to reach out to kind of, lump her in and be like, okay, now we need to create an outline, and you're going to take care of this part, which is your expertise, and then I'm going to take care of this part. And our lab is very collaborative. Every single paper we write, everybody contributes to it. So given the culture of my lab, I wouldn't know how to do that individually. Also, with making figures for academic publication, I started with PowerPoint because that's what I'm used to. So basically putting shapes together. If you want to create a membrane, you put like the circle shape and a wiggly sign and all of that. So it's definitely a lot of work using PowerPoint, and you need to be creative. Sometimes you can just search on Google for what you want to draw, and then use that as an inspiration to draw to make an original drawing of what you want. There's, for biology, people in biomedical science, there's this thing called BioRender. There is the free, actually there's no free version, but there's a free trial where and that one, it already has ready-made prepared figures that you can use, and you can just import and like create your own figure. Or there are templates as well. If you want to draw like a signaling pathway, you can use the template and basically modify some things, and they'll only require you to like cite BioRender in your publication. Also, if you're like really tech, if you're like I shouldn't say tech enthusiast, but if you're really good with like Adobe, there is the Photoshop, and you can, I think that's a little bit too technical for me, but if that's something you can learn, it's also helpful. I know for BioRender, sometimes universities purchase licenses to that, and then that way you can have free access to all of their libraries of figures and templates. And also for Adobe Photoshop too. I'm not sure if it's completely free, but the rudimentary way to go would be PowerPoint.